Hello! Welcome to Prologue for Little Women, adapted by Heather Chrisler and directed by Rachel Alderman. My name is Fiona Kyle, and I'm the literary manager and artistic associate here at Geva, as well as the dramaturg for this production. For longtime fans of the book, you'll likely already be aware of how much beloved author Louisa May Alcott borrowed from her own life for the novel Little Women. Let's get a refresher for those who are familiar and a brief introduction for those who aren't as familiar on the life and times of Louisa May Alcott. She was born in Germantown, Pennsylvania, now part of modern-day Philadelphia, on November 29, 1832. She was the second of four daughters, eldest Anna, followed by Louisa, Elizabeth, and Abigail May. Her parents were Amos Bronson Alcott, an educator and member of the Transcendentalist movement, and social worker Abigail "Abba" May Alcott. As you'll see on the big screen next to the box office, the Alcott family were friends with and often neighbors of many of the movers and shakers of the era, including, but not limited to, Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, and Nathaniel Hawthorne. The family moved around a great deal. According to biographies shared by Louisa May Alcott's The Orchard House, they moved more than 20 times in nearly 30 years, mainly in the Massachusetts and New England area. In 1840, with Emerson's help, they moved to Concord, Massachusetts. The Alcott sisters played with Emerson's children, often putting on plays together, something they all continued throughout their childhood years. Bronson Alcott encouraged all his children to keep diaries, which nurtured Alcott's early love of writing. She wrote her first poem at the age of 8. An avowed tomboy, Louisa disdained her given name and went by Lou, preferring the company of boys and fellow tomboys. As she wrote in her diary many years later, "Never liked girls or knew many, except my sisters." In 1849, Alcott started the Olive Leaf, a family newspaper featuring poems, stories, and household advice. Around this time, she also wrote her first novel, The Inheritance. In 1851, her poem Sunlight was published in Peterson's magazine under the pseudonym Flora Fairchild. In 1854, she released Flower Fables, a collection of tales, earning $35 from her publisher. Her writing career was well underway, and she continued to write even when her sister Elizabeth fell ill with scarlet fever in 1856. By the end of that year, she was contributing to numerous newspapers. The family purchased the Orchard House in 1857 with the intention that all would move in, but sadly, third sister Elizabeth died of scarlet fever before they moved. The rest of them moved to the Orchard House in 1858, which is where Alcott based Little Women. There's still a memorial to Elizabeth with her portrait hanging above her beloved keyboard in the Orchard House. Around this same time, eldest sister Anna met the man who would become her husband, John Bridge Pratt. Alcott was bereft after the death of Elizabeth and keenly felt the loss of her elder sister Anna to marriage. She loved her sisters fiercely and missed them. Alcott moved to Boston for a while and eventually worked as a governess until the outbreak of the Civil War. She wanted to enlist in the Union Army and fight alongside the men, but women were not allowed to fight. Instead, she sewed uniforms until 1862, when at the age of 30 she became an army nurse. For 6 weeks, she treated patients suffering from various diseases, assisted with amputations, and cleaned wounds at the Union Hotel Hospital in Georgetown. She was forced to leave early after contracting typhoid fever. Her father retrieved her, and she recovered at the Orchard House. Her father had built her a shelf desk. Youngest sister May, who was a highly respected artist at the time, who studied art in Italy, England, and France, and whose work was exhibited in the famous Paris Salon, painted flowers on the side of the shelf desk because they would last longer than real flowers. After the middling reception in 1864 to her first novel, published under her own name, Moods, Alcott wasn't sure what was next for her, especially since her writing career was a source of financial stability for the family, who often struggled. Her publisher, Thomas Niles, asked her to write a girl's story, which didn't fill her with much excitement, but she wrote part 1 of Little Women in just a few months. Published in 1868, Part 1 of Little Women was an immediate success, with readers clamoring for a sequel. Alcott wrote feverishly for 2 months, and the second part was published in 1869. Little Women became an instant classic and led Alcott to write several more books in the series, including Good Wives, Little Men, and Jo's Boys. The success of her writing provided financial support to the family, and Little Women cemented her as one of the most iconic authors in America. Now, to Heather Chrisler's adaptation and what makes it so special. Chrisler wrote it in 2018, and it was set to be produced in 2020, when of course the pandemic shut everything down. Luckily, also in 2020, it was named to the Kilroy's list, which is a list of plays and musicals by women, non-binary and trans playwrights, so that theaters can get to know their work. It has since had productions all over the country, from Florida, Illinois, Iowa, and Michigan, before arriving right here in Rochester, New York. Chrisler said she was inspired by Play Pretend, which we'll talk about a little bit more later. She also mentioned that she felt most of the adaptations of the novel, especially film versions, often put more emphasis on the men in the story. What she was aiming for with hers was to keep the focus solely on the story of the March sisters, to really show how they became full-grown, not just little, women. The sisters are, of course, the heart of the story. She also wanted to emphasize Jo's journey as a writer, and as Jo is very much a stand-in for Alcott herself, show all the elements that led to Jo writing the story of her sisters. The dramatic structure of this adaptation efficiently brings in all of our favorite moments from the novel, while balancing those two elements that were most important to Chrisler. Of all the adaptations that exist for the stage, Geva wanted to produce Chrisler's because of her intentions. This story resonates with everyone, regardless of their lived experience of gender, age, or background, and we all share the beautiful and sometimes painful experience of growing up. With this production, it was important to us to center the voices and experiences of women, femmes, and non-binary folks. This adaptation feels like it's inspired by an étude style. Étude, French for study, is a word that's used in theatrical traditions where actors will look at the scene before the scene to understand what the character's motivations may be in the scripted scene. In the adaptation, Chrisler expanded upon certain moments that really show the sisters having fun together to bring in that beautiful sense of play that we all remember from when we were young people ourselves. In the novel, we hear about Jo's plays and how the sisters act them out, and in this adaptation, we're watching those moments really come to life. The gorgeous set is designed by the Swader brothers, who worked with Geva's properties supervisor, Teresa Granger, to make the March attic space feel like a playroom, filled with everyday objects that transform into something else. There's something very do-it-yourself DIY about the design that feels so authentic to how the March sisters would have played together. During our tech rehearsals, everyone on the creative team said how much they wished they had a play space like this growing up, and the non-actors among us wanted to get up and play with the dollhouse or read in one of the corner chairs. It's a lived-in space that helps tell the story before the first lines are even spoken. 3 out of 4 of our actors in Little Women play more than one role. In theater speak, we say that they're double cast, which always presents a fun challenge for a costume designer to handle quick changes, when an actor has to rush off stage as one character and return quickly as another. Costume designer Heron Kaputkin approached that with aplomb, as you'll see in the performance. She was inspired by American painters such as Lily Martin Spencer and Jerome Thompson, who were both based in the New England area during the mid-1800s, as was Alcott. Kaputkin used textiles and colors that would have been common in the era, and she gave each sister a color and texture specific to them, as well as fun details to make their outfits distinct. As already mentioned, Christopher and Justin Swader returned to Geva to work again as co-scenic designers with director Rachel Alderman after their first collaboration on last year's sumptuous Dial M for Murder. The rest of the creative team includes Associate Director Robin Levine, who splits her time between New York City and Rochester, lighting designer Asia M. Jackson, wig and makeup designer Emma Gustafson, who worked with us on this season's Christmas Carol and last season's The Color Purple, Geva's own Julia Breggy as production stage manager and myself as dramaturg, as well as Emily Heyman as sound designer and composer, who was influenced by music from the New England era during the 1800s. Director Rachel Alderman has loved the story of Little Women for most of her life and said that the story captured her heart and imagination. As a young person, she would travel to the New England area and find a place to read or play and pretend it was the March Sisters' attic. Alderman even played Jo in high school. I'd love to share something Alderman said about Little Women for you to think about when you come to Geva for the performance. Each generation gets to reclaim this story and live in its pages, play in that attic of Concord, Massachusetts, and live in their own American world. Both Louisa May Alcott and Jo were trying to figure out their place in the story of our country. From tiny decisions about gloves, meals, and what games to play, to large choices about how to show up in society as our most authentic selves. Little Women provides a map for children from age 12 onward. What values do you hold on tight to while the world swirls around you? And who do you walk through the tempest with to keep you safe and sane? Thank you for joining me for Prologue, and I hope you enjoy Little Women.